Alright, so if you had asked me about 3 to 4 years ago if I was into memoirs, I would have given you a resounding no as an answer. And the reason is because I often turn to books for an escape. I was looking for fiction, for fantasy, for sci-fi, for things that would let me escape into a different world and forget all of the things that were happening in my life and in the real world. But I think as my reading taste has changed over the past several years, as you guys have witnessed as you've been following me, I have come to appreciate the way that we can come to process some of the horrible, terrible, and sometimes beautiful things that are happening in our world and in our minds through the books that we read, whether it's fiction or whether it's non-fiction and whether it's a memoir. Over the past couple years, I have just come to appreciate memoirs so much. The idea of getting a first-hand account of someone's life and how their feelings and experiences and past have shaped them into the person that they are is just so interesting and fascinating to me. I have come to both approach it in a way of finding empathy for other people, but also finding a piece of recognition in someone else for the things that I'm feeling. So with that in mind, if you're new here, my name is Jananie and this is my channel, This Story Ain't Over, and today I am going to be giving you 10 book recommendations of memoirs that you can pick up right away. Of these 10 memoirs, I've fully finished reading 8 of them, and 2 of them I'm currently in the middle of, but I still think you should pick them up. And then across these 10, there's also several different themes that we can kind of pick out. Some of them deal with mental illness, mental health, mental disorders, and then other ones deal with just cultural experiences and life experiences that have formed the person or the celebrity that they are today. And then some of these also touch upon really traumatic experiences that have shaped the person's life and also taught them to recognize certain beauties of the world. All of these I think are incredible, incredible books, but I do think you should approach each of them with some caution and some grace for yourself if you're going to be picking them up. A lot of these books detail some hard experiences that the people who are writing them have gone through, and I definitely think you should be looking up some content warnings for each of them just because you don't know what place you're in and what you can handle in the moment. So I think just approaching all of them with some grace for yourself will be a good idea. Alrighty, with that said, let's get into the first batch of books, and these ones are all ones that deal with mental health in some way. And the first book that I have is one that I have been raving about constantly for the past few months since I read it in January of this year, and that book is What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. I've been raving about this one to basically everyone I can talk to who will listen to me about it, and it's also called A Memoir of Healing from Complex Trauma. And basically this book is written by Stephanie Fu, and she details her experience from when she's a child into her adult life, and the frame sort of narrative of this is her coming to realize that she has complex PTSD. She had been going to therapy for many years and at one point comes upon this diagnosis and realizes that there's not that much information, not that much treatment available, and she goes on this sort of journey of trying to decipher this illness that she has and understand it and find ways to help herself and help others. And I think it's just such an interesting an incredible memoir, not only because of the way that she so honestly talks about her experiences, but also the way that she approaches it from multiple different angles and from a perspective of wanting to learn more. She offers both personal accounts and also thoroughly researched ones. She was a producer and also a reporter, I think, at some point, and so she approaches it with that kind of lens, I think. And while it was both fascinating to learn more about this mental illness and the things that she learns, I think it was also kind of heartbreaking to hear her talk about how this mental illness had destroyed many parts of her life and, you know, taken away time from her that, you know, she won't get back. But through all that, she has this level of perseverance, which I think is just so incredible and just shows you her resilience and also the hopefulness of this overall memoir. She talks a lot about different types of therapy and different treatment options and, you know, the privilege of all of this stuff and how many people can't get these opportunities to get treated. And she also talks about the effects of her community and the immigrant experience and the way that her parents' experiences shaped her own and the things that they did when she was a child, how that shaped her mental illness and her life later on. One thing I really love about the back description of this book is that it talks about how this is a story of her reclaiming her agency over the trauma that was instilled in her life. And I think that is a really important thing. I think for anyone who has gone through any kind of trauma, you will understand the feeling that, you know, you are not in control of what is happening and, you know, you can't escape this trauma. And so the idea of wanting to reclaim yourself and your agency agency in the situation is just incredible. I honestly really love this book, and it was just kind of like going through a little therapy session reading it as well. I highly recommend the audiobook if any of you are planning to pick this one up, although I'm sure it's great on print as well or ebook. But the reason I say the audiobook is great is because there are parts of the book later in like the second half where she records sessions with her psychotherapist, someone who actually specializes in complex PTSD, and they actually add the recordings that she had into the audiobook. So you're actually hearing their two voices and like the actual moment that those things happened, whereas like in the book it's just like, you know, transcribed out. But I think hearing their voices and hearing them talk is just another level of experience, and honestly I just really loved it. It was really interesting and just fascinating. I am fascinated by people who record their therapy sessions for some reason, and I think there's so much to learn, but obviously you don't need to like overanalyze this stuff. But the way that she inputted it into the book was just really fascinating, so highly recommend in so many different ways. The last thing I'll say about this book is that I really love the way it confronted the idea that although you can be successful on paper, you know, you can have a job, you can have a relationship that's great, you can have all of these things, but internally so many other things could be going on, and that could be causing a detrimental effect to you as a person and then eventually coming into your life. So although by age 30 it seemed like she had everything, she was deeply suffering. Now before we get into the next book on this list, I did want to talk about the sponsor of today's video, which is very on topic, and that is BetterHelp. I felt like this sponsorship made a lot of sense for this video because I'm talking a lot about mental illness and mental health, and BetterHelp is actually the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a variety of issues. I think for those of you who have been watching my channel for a while know that I have struggled with my mental health for quite a while, and especially in this last year. And you know, there have been ups and downs, but I think throughout all of that, I have come to learn a lot about my own mind and my own self. But I've struggled with depression for most of my life, and that was one of the reasons why I sought out care and therapy, and I actually first sought it out through BetterHelp. I'm currently now going to therapy every week. I highly recommend it. It's actually honestly great, and it's one of the things that has changed my life in a very dramatic way and has helped me come to terms with a lot of the things that have happened in my life and understand my mind so much better. So to get started with BetterHelp, all you have to do is actually just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences for therapy. And with that, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. One of the things I appreciate about BetterHelp is that you can talk to your therapist in multiple different ways. So you can use text, chat, phone, or video call. It's also really easy to use. You can message your therapist at any time, and you can schedule your live sessions whenever is convenient for you. And one of my favorite things about BetterHelp is that if your therapist isn't the right fit for you for any reason, and honestly you need to find someone who is the right fit for you, who understands and listens to you. If you don't feel like they're a right fit, you can just switch them on BetterHelp for no additional charge. Overall, BetterHelp gives you the same professionalism and quality that you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom picked for you, more scheduling flexibility, and also at a more affordable price. Regardless of what you're going through, and even if you feel like you don't need it, I think therapy is so important for everyone in this day and age. And if you would like to, you can get 10% off your first month with BetterHelp using the link down below. It's www.betterhelp.com/thisstoryaintover. I really hope many of you will check out that link and get that help that you deserve, because honestly, therapy has benefited me in so many ways, and I can't imagine my life without it now. Alrighty, with that said, the next book on this list is one that I actually mentioned recently in my book haul, and that is I Want to Die, But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki by Baek-si-hee, and this is translated by Anton Her. So I am currently in the middle of this one. I'm almost done, and I'm actually really enjoying it. It's not my favorite of the memoirs on this list, but I do think there are some really interesting things about it to be learned, and I just found it overall really comforting and fascinating to read. The author of this book, Baek-si-hee, is a millennial living in South Korea, and she is the social media director at this publishing house, and this book basically goes over her therapy sessions with her psychiatrist over a 12-week period, and she basically splits them up into these several chapters that are accompanied by like this short little essay about the things that they kind of talk about in that particular session. And I think what I liked about this book is that it's structured very different from regular memoirs that I'm used to, and the way that the author was just deeply trying to understand her own thoughts and emotions and feelings, and the way that she was thinking differently than others. I don't remember if it's come up in the book while I've been reading it so far, but it does mention in the back blurb for the author that she does suffer from dysthymia, which is a persistent mild form of depression. So that's particularly what she's dealing with. But I think there's also parts of this book where she's talking about her anxiety and just the overall like self-esteem issues that she has. I think particularly for me, I related a lot to the parts where she talks about how she would think about and frame the relationships she had with people in her mind. And I found myself just tabbing a lot of parts and really connecting with those. I think no matter what you're going through, this one is still a really valuable read, and it's definitely more on the lighter, I would say, side of mental health memoirs. It doesn't really talk about super traumatic experiences, and I think it's more about her current thoughts and feelings and emotions and how she's trying to deal with those and how she's trying to reframe those in her mind. So I think it's valuable regardless, and definitely a really short read that you can pick up anytime. Alrighty, next up I have a memoir that everyone and their mom has been raving about constantly, and it's one of my favorites from last year. I think when it came out, it feels like so long ago, but that book is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette-McCurdy. This is the fantastic and viral memoir of last year, I think, where Jeanette-McCurdy, who is an actress, she was Sam on iCarly and Sam and Cat with Ariana Grande, and she was a child actress. And this book basically goes through her experience as a child actress, but also the very abusive relationship that she had with her mother. And she's looking back at all this in a moment in her life after her mother has died, and she's starting to come to terms with how abusive that relationship was. And I think one of the things that I really loved about this book was how accurately she portrayed how you can so deeply love someone but also have them abuse you in unthinkable ways. Another aspect that really resonated with me, and which I know resonated with so many people around the world, was just the dark humor that she approaches her story with. I mentioned this book in a previous video one time, and someone had commented and said that they didn't understand why the book was funny. Like, people kept calling it funny and they didn't get it. And they were like, it's such a sad book, like there's so many sad things that happen and all of that. And I was like, yes, but it's the tone in which she tells the story that is incredibly funny, despite all of the very terrible things that she goes through in her life. And I think when you are someone who has gone through traumatic experiences similar to hers or not so similar, a lot of the times we tend to approach those experiences with a level of dark humor and a level of, you know, trying to dissociate ourselves from that. And so I think that is something that just resonated with a lot of people around the world who ended up loving this book. I would caution you to look up the content warnings for this one, like many of the other books on this list, because it does get a bit dark and a bit sad, but I think her perseverance through all of it and her attempt to find peace for herself and, you know, find what she loves is what is so beautiful about this book. Alrighty, the last book that I have for this batch of books talking about mental illness and mental health is An Unquiet Mind by Kay Redfield Jamison. This is something that I actually just stumbled upon yesterday and decided to download the audiobook and listen to completely all last night, and I'm so glad I did, because honestly that was kind of a life-changing read for me. This is one that I think might not be as relatable to lots of people, but I think it's fascinating regardless because of the moment in time that the author was going through all of this stuff. So Kay Redfield Jamison is someone who was diagnosed with manic depression or bipolar disorder as she was already becoming like a clinical psychologist. So she was like a PhD student and, you know, was treating patients and all this, but she was doing all this in the 70s. And the reason I picked this book up was because I was just searching for more public figures or people who had bipolar disorder just to like understand more of that experience. And this book had come up, and it's like a 3-hour audiobook, and honestly it was so freaking fantastic. She is a woman who is very different in life from me, but I think a lot of her experiences were very relatable. But through it all, I think what I found interesting about this book was the way that she talks about the importance of treatment and medication and how she resisted it for a certain extent for a while, and how she didn't want to come to terms with the idea of herself having a mental illness to this degree when she was treating people with mental illnesses, and how that could threaten her career at the time. Like, this is the 70s. This is at a time when there weren't lots of treatments or medications for bipolar disorder. It's when they first started using lithium as a treatment. And it's also from a time when some people were not given licenses to treat patients because of their mental illnesses. So highly recommend if you're looking for a short memoir to read about mental health and mental illness, but also one that sort of talks about the medical side of things. And one thing I really appreciate about this is that she talks about the stigma of mental illness and madness and insanity, and how she was so terrified of how people would view her and her colleagues would view her, but she still chose to be open about this. So I think it was fascinating and I really enjoyed it, so highly recommend. Alrighty, next up I have a batch of memoirs that deal with the authors sort of going through a traumatic experience that informs the story that they are telling in the memoir. So the first one that I have is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. This is a very popular one that a lot of people love, and for good reason. It is a fantastic memoir told in a really beautiful way. So this book follows Michelle Zauner, who is an indie rock musician known as Japanese Breakfast, but a lot of this book actually deals with her life before that, and it deals primarily with her relationship with her mother and her grief after her mother's passing. I know a lot of people who really appreciate this memoir for the way that she talks about her grief. I personally have not gone through grief like that, so I can't speak to that experience, but I know a lot of people who really love this book for that reason. And I think for me, what I found really fascinating about this memoir and why I find so much value in it is the way that she talked about her relationship with her mother and how complicated that was and how the grief even further complicated it. This is similar to I'm Glad My Mom Died, but in a different way, because I think her experience as an Asian American person also colors this situation and experience with her mother. And one thing I really loved about how she talks about her relationship with her mother is through food and through being at H Mart, and how all of these very sensory and everyday things are so related to her memories of her mother. If you love books about mother-daughter relationships, if you're looking for a memoir about grief, if you're looking for one similar to I'm Glad My Mom Died but less about sort of the negative relationship between the mother and daughter and more of a positive one, then this one is the one to pick up. Alrighty, next up I have probably my favorite or second favorite memoir ever, and that book is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a memoir that came out several years ago, and at the time it wasn't even on my radar. As we know, I wasn't into memoirs at the time, but since having picked this up last year, it completely changed my life and also changed the way that I think about a lot of things that are so regular to everyone these days. And it's all thoughts that I've had before, but it was never really articulated quite correctly in a way that I think was as powerful as this book. But for those of you who don't know My Name basically deals with the Stanford sexual assault case from quite a few years ago. You may know the perpetrator, Brock Turner, the rapist. Now, what's so incredible about this book is that Chanel Miller, who was the victim of this case, was originally kept anonymous. Her identity wasn't revealed. She was known as Emily Doe while the court case was happening. But following the court case and the verdict and everything that happened after, she revealed her identity through this essay that she wrote online and then through this memoir as well. And that is why it's called Know My Name. The victims are forgotten and their experience through all this is belittled. And as we know, sexual assault survivors go through so much, especially when they're trying to find justice for, you know, what was done to them. So in this book, Chanel Miller basically takes us back to even before the assault happens, back to who she was as a child and who she was before this, and then all of the years after the assault and through the entire court case, and how she was picked and prodded and pulled apart in court, and how throughout all of it, even though she was the one who was assaulted, she was made to seem like the bad guy. And there's so much more nuance to this, and you just need to read it to understand, and I'm explaining this terribly, but honestly, this is like a book that will just change your life, and I think everyone needs to read it as well and just understand this process and why this is such a horrifying experience for so many women out there. I think the last thing I want to say about this, and the thing that I really appreciate that Chanel Miller did with this book, was shedding a light on just general pervasive rape culture, how it just permeates everything in our lives, and how it's become such a socially accepted thing in our lives, and how people just brush it aside, and how that mere act of pushing it aside just perpetuates this culture, this rape culture that causes situations like this, and how boys are allowed to just be boys, but women are punished for just trying to have the basic freedom that they should be allowed to have. Obviously, a lot of triggers with this one if you're planning to pick it up, but truly one of the best memoirs I've ever read. Alrighty, the next memoir that I have is also one that deals with equally difficult subject matter, but I think it's so incredible and important, and I love the way that the author wrote this memoir as well. And that book is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I fell in love with this memoir earlier this year, and it was just so impactful, and I think it's another one of those memoirs that really sheds a light on just general social issues and things that a lot of people aren't thinking about, and things that just become so socially accepted that we are not recognizing the harm that it does to individual people in the world. So in this book, the author basically details the abusive relationship that they had with their same-sex partner. And one of the big ideas and major themes that they talk about is the way that we approach same-sex abusive relationships in a very different way than we do with heterosexual same-sex abusive relationships. The way that they are criminalized, the way that they are talked about, the way that they are treated, and the way that victims are not even believed in some cases because it's not looking the same way. She also just talks about queer experience in general, which I really appreciated, and queer representations in media. But one of the things I really love about this book is just the format in which it is told. It is part memoir and like detailing all these issues, but also part a healing experience and part poetry and part narrative. And in the book, the author actually writes in second person. So they are addressing themselves from the past when they were going through this very traumatic experience. So an example of that is you cried in front of many people, you missed readings, parties, the supermoon, you tried to tell your story to people who didn't know how to listen. You made a fool of yourself in more ways than one. I thought you died, but writing this, I'm not sure you did. It's a really beautifully told memoir, but one that's also really heartbreaking and also kind of terrifying at some points, to recognize that you have gotten to a point that you thought you might not ever get out of. If you are new to memoirs, or if you really love poetry or interesting formats to books, I think this one is definitely one to pick up if you can handle all of the content warnings. I think from the way that this book is told, it feels a little bit like narrative fiction, so you just get wrapped up into the story and you feel so much for our author. Alrighty, the last three memoirs on this list definitely are a little bit lighter, I think, and also deal with more of a general look at the person's life overall and their experiences, and several different stories and vignettes of their life that contributed to making them the person that they are. All three of these people also happen to be celebrities, so it's definitely more of that traditional sort of memoir format of like just telling your life story, which I appreciate as well. So the first one I have is one that I recently read and absolutely loved. I mentioned this in my recent book haul, but that is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, Stories from a South African Childhood. I absolutely love Trevor Noah. He is a comedian. He was the host of The Daily Show at one point, and he is just so awesome and hilarious and just so great. He has multiple Netflix specials as well, so you should check them out. But I loved his memoir. I read it via the audiobook and he narrates the whole thing, and it was just so great to just listen to him tell his story. And the way that he tells the story is just so humorous but also heartfelt, and I really appreciated both the highs and the lows of everything that he talked about in this book. Particularly in this book, he covers his childhood and the stories from when he lived in South Africa and how that informs his outlook on life now, and the way that he thinks about race and about culture and just so many other things. I really loved hearing him talk in depth about South Africa and like the effects of apartheid and how he viewed a lot of things differently from like how we view them in the West, and I think that's a really important perspective as well. And not only that, I also really appreciated how he gives a lot of credit to his mother and the women in his life who shaped him into who he is now. And his mother is just such an incredible person. Like the way he talks about her in this book is just so wonderful, and I think he gives so much color and character to her as a person, but also gives her so much credit for how she brought him up and made him into the person he is. Like many of my favorite memoirs, this is a book that talks about not only the very personal experiences of the person, but also the very larger social issues that contribute to the experiences that they had. Trevor does a really great job of connecting his own personal experiences back to the economic and racial and social issues going on in South Africa at the time. Definitely such an amazing read, and one that will have you laughing out loud, I promise you, especially if you listen to the audiobook. So highly recommend this one. Alrighty, the next book that I have is probably the most lighthearted out of all of the memoirs that I've talked about today. So if you're looking for one that's not as dark as the ones that I've been talking about, this is definitely the one to pick up. So that book is You Can't Be Serious by Kal Penn. So I really love Kal Penn. He is an actor and he also worked in the Obama administration. And the thing that I love about this book is that it's quite lighthearted, but it really does just talk about the idea of the American dream and how a lot of his life sort of surrounded that idea. Not only that, he also talks about just his experiences as a person of color in Hollywood, which I really appreciated, but also his experiences as a South Asian person, as an immigrant, as someone who grew up from a background of people who were constantly telling him he needed to be a doctor or an engineer or something, and he was not living up to his potential by pursuing something so frivolous as the arts. So a lot of that was just really relatable to me. And I think overall what I loved about this book and what made me appreciate it so much was that he approaches all of the stories with such a level of humor and care that it really feels like you're sitting down for a drink with a friend and you're just hearing their stories. So yeah, if you're looking for a more lighthearted read, if you are interested in any of those topics that I talked about, like him being a person of color in Hollywood and the limitations of that, or his experience sort of breaking out of the traditional mold that he was used to, if you're interested in the political aspect as well, all great things, and overall just a really fun, heartfelt, and humorous book. Alright, I feel like I've been talking for ages, but the last book on this list is one that I'm currently in the middle of and hoping to finish very soon, but I'm already in love with it and I knew I needed to include it on this video. So that book is Finding Me by Viola Davis. I absolutely love Viola Davis. She is an actress and one of the most incredible women on the planet, and I admire and respect her so much. But having started reading this, I admire and respect her even more, to an even like higher extent, because of everything that she has gone through. This is a very traditional memoir in the sense of she's just like telling you these stories from when she was younger and a child, but also going later into her life and how all those experiences have affected her up to this day. It's not the longest memoir, so you can definitely get through it, and I highly recommend the audiobook because she narrates it herself. But this is one that I've been like taking in small bites because I think a lot of what she goes through is very difficult. If you are someone who has ever experienced any kind of poverty, this can also be like very heartbreaking, I think, to read, because a lot of her early life was spent in poverty. So it's just very heartbreaking in that sense, I think. But I am loving just the honesty and raw look at her life that she is providing all of us. Alrighty, with that said, those are all the books on this really long video. I did not mean to talk that long, but I'm just so passionate about all of these books because they are just so incredible, and I think you will learn so much from each and every one of these people's stories. I am in love with memoirs now, so definitely leave me your memoir book recommendations down below so I can pick up some more. Let me know if you have personally read any of these and if you enjoyed them, or if you're planning to pick up any of these soon based off my recommendation. As always, I really appreciate you guys and everything that you do for me and allowing me to have this space, so thank you so much. And thank you again to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. You guys should definitely go check out their deal down below. Get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp using the link www.betterhelp.com/thisstoryaintover. If you want to get more regular updates on what I'm reading and what I'm up to, definitely go check out my Instagram down below, and I will see you guys in my next video. So please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!